Our guest is a national educator, author, and speaker to everyone from Fortune 500 companies to world-class athletes. He holds a Ph.D. in psychology and has a unique perspective on the German Airbus crash. Let us welcome into the studio Dr. Terry Lyles. He joins us here on MidPoint. Dr. Lyles, thank you so much for being here again.
Appreciate it.
This is frightening to think about, but here we have the possibility that one person took this plane, flew it directly into the mountain in what does not necessarily equate to suicide, but in many minds, this equates to murder. What's the psychology behind that of someone who would do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, first of all, there's no psychological testing that's a mandate there, you know, with this airline and a lot of Europe. So,
let's stop there first of all. I mean, and you hit a good point. Lufthansa says they do not psychologically test.
Correct.
Here in America, they do.
Yes.
Is this a mistake not to test someone who is under that sort of stress?
I believe so, absolutely. I mean, we test people here in this country for all kinds of things, for just CEO positions and president positions. So someone who has the lives of 149 people behind them, they should be tested every way possible to make sure that they're competent, healthy, sane, alert. All those things should be taken into account, and that's why we do it here in the U.S. So I think it's a huge issue that would need to change. There should be some kind of international protocol for flying since we fly across borders. We had 3 U.S. citizens on board. I think it should have been done a long time ago, a lot like Homeland Security after 9/11. People have to start communicating together as a larger global community because things happen like this. We don't know what the motive was with this guy, whether it was a terrorist attack from him, whether it was just suicidal. We don't know at this point.
Well, that just hits the next point, because if you're going to have psychological testing, this guy, there is no evidence of any problem. I mean, he certainly wasn't known to the authorities as a threat.
Sure.
He was a practice pilot. He was FAA registered. Nothing in his past. So even if we're going to say, let's test somebody's psychologically, what are we looking for?
Well, you're looking for irregularities. You're looking for process and thought. You're looking for regular patterns. We know that pilots struggle many times with fatigue because of sleep cycles. Those things need to be monitored. I mean, I do day rest, sleep cycle monitoring on athletes and performers. And it's really easy to start seeing that, you know, your serotonin level is being, you know, distributed incorrectly because of your lack of sleep. So you need to compensate that with carbohydrates and proper light and rest and sleep when you can get it. So there's variations of testing that you can do periodically that would at least give you a heads up if something was there deeper that obviously we have no recollection of now because we just don't know. He was just medically okay.
The one thing that we keep hearing now from the Lufthansa folks and from the prosecutor is that according to the voice recorder, they say that the co-pilot was breathing normally, which would then indicate that they can hear him not in a state of agitation, if you will. What does that then tell us about his makeup, if indeed he was that calm heading into a mountain at 400 miles an hour?
Right. Well, I had conversations with others earlier, and I was saying I wish I could hear the recording of that actual breath pattern, because breath pattern says something about not only the psychology of a person, but the physiological state. Whether he was breathing more in a sleep mode, if he did happen to pass out, we would know by his breathing rate. If he was just calm and assessed because he's already made a decision that he's going to kill everyone on board, we could know that pretty much by his breathing rate. He wasn't hyperventilating, so he wasn't anxious. He wasn't frustrated. He was very calm. So it would give us a better insight, but I don't think any of us will be able to know that right away because they're holding that kind of privy and close to the chest until they find out more information. But breathing rate says a lot about the emotional, psychological state of a person any moment during the day.
Let's talk about the psychological with about a minute left here. We have an individual who allegedly drove this plane into the mountain, killing himself. However, he took 149 other lives with him. How do we then separate the psychological between a man looking to commit suicide, but a man who may know that he's taking all the rest of those people with him, and that's murder?
I think it is murder because I don't think he made that decision, you know, 30 minutes before landing. I think he already knew what was going to happen and what he was going to do, and I think he had a plan.
Could have killed himself by himself,
absolutely.
too.
You can do that after you land.
Sure.
You can do that before you take off. You can do that in a lot of, you know, humane ways. He did this intentionally. He didn't intend just to kill himself. For some reason, he was making a statement, whether it was to an organization, whether it was to his own psychosis, we may not ever know. But this had to be premeditated, in my opinion.
But as you're looking at it, then, let's make that very clear. We don't have all the evidence, but from what you're hearing from a psychological standpoint, this is someone who was out to commit murder.
Yeah, he didn't lock the door and just say, I'm going to have a bad moment here. He locked the door knowing why he was locking the door. You know, motive's the only thing that separates first, second, third degree murder.
Certainly.
He had to know what he was doing. He didn't lock the door with everybody beating on the door going, I'm not going to let you back in. There was something that he predetermined when the pilot left the cockpit, and he enacted that process.
It's a fascinating process, and we're going to have to start looking at it here now for weeks on end. Probably, Dr.
Thank
Lyles,
you.
always a
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank
My
you so
pleasure.
much for coming in.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bo Bergdahl faces life in prison. The 5 terrorists exchanged for his release remain free and could possibly return to Afghanistan later on this spring. We'll focus on the Bergdahl case when MidPoint continues.